So we saw that short. So in this chapter 20, which is a conversation between Vidura and Maitreya, that's been going on from the beginning of the canto. However, this chapter is specifically again a reiteration of again the bringing the focus to Vidura and Maitreya's conversation. That's why the chapter is titled like that, and it's pretty much Vidura's questions and Maitreya's answers. Also, no extra personality speaking uh, in this chapter so much. So here, this chapter has 53 verses, and here the questions, the direction of the conversation will be through Shaunakadi Rishi's questions. And after Shaunaka Rishi's questions, then Vidura asks certain questions. And Vidura's questions leads to Maitreya explaining both Sarga in brief and Visarga also about Brahma's creation in somewhat of a detail. So we will see what they're discussing in this chapter. So for clarity's sake, again, I'll go through what is happening in this chapter. In the chapter 12, there was a discussion about secondary creation. We saw how different kinds of plants, different kinds of animals, and different sages, all these things were created. Like four Kumaras were created, Lord Shiva was created, and then the sages headed by Marichi were created. So all of them were created in chapter 12. At the end, last, finally, Manu was created. So now they're not just going to start, okay, Manu is already created. They're in this chapter, they're going to revise whatever happened in the chapter 12. And from chapter 21, the descendants of Manu, Swayambhu Manus, will be discussed from chapter 21. That's when we will enter into the pastimes of Kardama Muni, Devahuti, and Kapila Dev. So that starts from chapter 21 until the end of the canto, until chapter 33, I suppose. So here is where we are now that uh, Shaunaka the Rishis heard about the pastimes of Varahadev and Hiranyaksha. So they are asking this question to Suta Goswami. So Shaunaka the Rishis are asking Suta Goswami, okay, that you just told us that this whole pastime of Varahadev, but where did you left the conversation between Vidura and Maitreya a long back, and that was actually Swayambhu Manu's creation had happened. So they ask again, what did Swayambhu Manu do? Because the Manu's duty is to show the path of liberation for all the living entities. So, what did Swayambhu Manu do to show the path of liberation to all the living entities? And they also ask, Vidura is a very great person. So they explain in two, three verses, what is the greatness of Vidura? Who was Vidura? First of all, he was a great devotee. He is a great devotee of the Supreme Lord Krishna. And he's not just a devotee, he was also a friend of Lord Krishna. Lord Krishna would ask him for counsel, he would go to his home, have lunch with them. So it was a more of a close relationship. And because Dhritarashtra and company were offenders of Krishna, he actually gave up their company. And he's not a normal person, he's a son of Vyasadev. And he accepted the lotus feet of Krishna and was attached to Krishna's devotees, because we may say, yeah, Dhritarashtra was also a son of Vedavyas. But no, the specific importance or greatness of Vidura was not just he was a son of Vedavyas, but he also accepted the lotus feet of Krishna. And he was attached to Krishna's devotees, like Pandavas. And he was visiting various holy places like Maitreya and like Ganges, Saraswati, and Yamuna, all the holy places around these rivers. So we are very sure that he was asking more about Krishna's pastimes or more about Hari Katha. So what more did he inquire from Maitreya? Please continue the narration. You spoke about Varahadev, but go back to the narration of Vidura and Maitreya. because we are sure Vidura is such a great person that they just listed. He's a great devotee, he's a friend of Lord Krishna, he is attached to Krishna and he is attached to Krishna's devotees. Surely he must have asked more Krishna Katha from more Krishna Katha from uh, Maitreya Rishi. So please explain. So there must have been more Krishna Katha that was discussed between Vidura and Maitreya. And here they are glorifying. Why they are eager or how much they are eager they are showing. Tanah kirtaya bhadram te kirtanyodara karmanan rasagya kon tripyeta hari leelamritam pibhan. So Tanah kirtaya bhadram te, that person who about whom one should be singing. So please narrate all about that Supreme Lord. Kirtaya. Please describe about all the magnanimous pastimes of the Supreme Lord. Kirtan Yodara Karmanaha. His activities are worth glorifying. The activities of the Supreme Lord are the only activities which is worth glorifying. Kirtan Yo Udara Karmanaha. Because his activities are very magnanimous. Udara. Rasagya kona trupyata. If a person has any taste, has aroused any taste for hearing about Krishna, rasagya, one who understands the real mellows, kona trupyata. How can he be satisfied? Which is that person who actually understands the real essence of life, rasagya, kon trupyata. How will he be satisfied? Hari Leela Amritam Pivan, by hearing about the pastimes of Hari. He will not be disturbed. He will never be satisfied because he knows what is the, excuse me, what is the right thing, what is the right thing to actually discuss. So he will never be actually satisfied with what he is hearing about Krishna. He will be interested in more and more hearing about Krishna. So in this way, the Sutta Goswami, the Shaunaka, the rishis are glorifying the participants in the discussion, that is Vidura and Maitreya, and they are also glorifying the process that they are engaged, which is discussing about Krishna. And now they are going to inspire Sutta Goswami more by saying how in this way they are inspiring Sutta Goswami to speak more. And Sutta Goswami says, actually, Vidura was so delighted to hear the pastimes of Varahadev. There is like one full verse which is explaining how he was feeling. By hearing the pastime of Varahadev and Hiranyaksha's battle, Vidura was completely, his hairs were standing on, and he was so thrilled to know that the Supreme Lord actually fought such amazingly with Hiranyakashipu and killed him. So by hearing that, he was so much in bliss, he was so delighted, and then he inquired from Maitreya, like which is going to come in the following verses. So Vidura inquires about Brahma's creation. Now that he heard about Varahadev, so now he is going to ask Maitreya Rishi, going back to chapter 12. So, what did Brahma do to create living beings after evolving the Prajapatis? Because in the chapter 12, towards the end, all the Prajapatis were created, and Manu was created, and all of them were created. So now that's why he's asking, okay, now that what did Brahma do to create living beings after evolving the Prajapatis? Various other living entities are supposed to be created. Only the Prajapatis, who were progenitors, were created. How did the progenitors create other species? So, how did the Prajapatis create according to the order of Brahma? How did they evolve this manifested universe? What did they do? What did those Prajapatis do? Did the Prajapatis create in conjunctions with their respective wives? Did they remain independent in their action, or did they all jointly produce it? So, in relation to secondary creation, so these are the questions of Vidura 9, 10, and 11. So, now because he is just asking details of the secondary creation, Maitreya does not jump into secondary creation directly because there was such a tangential discussion, not in a bad sense, in a long discussion about Varahadev, Hiranyaksha, and the four Kumaras cursing Jaya and Vijayas and all these things. So he is reiterating whatever he said in the past chapters. So that's why he is going to describe primary creation very briefly in 4 verses, and then he is going to reiterate some aspects of the secondary creation that he already described in chapter 12. So before I get into this section, I would like to ask if there are any questions at this point we can take. Okay, if there are no questions, we can continue. So now Maitreya is going to summarize what is primary creation, Sarga, to Vidura. So let's see that. I'm sorry. Yeah. So the Supreme Lord Mahavishnu, he lies on the Karana ocean, and that's why he's called as Karanodakshaya Vishnu. And here Maitreya is going to explain both Karana and Karya Srishtis. We have seen this multiple times, so I'm not going in very much detail. So basically, he says how the equilibrium of the three modes, which is called as Pradhana. So this is in a three modes in an inactive state. It's an equilibrium state of the material nature. It was unagitated. So by the vision of uh, the glance of Mahavishnu, the time factor, the jiva, karma, and swabhava, all this is impregnated into this pradhana material nature. After receiving the time factor, the pradhana gets agitated with the time factor and then transforms into something called as Mahat Tattva. So this is the verse 12 that Maitreya Rishi explains to Vidura, that the pradhana, which was in an equilibrium state, was agitated by the vision or the glance of Mahavishnu and transformed into Mahat Tattva, which was predominantly in the mode of goodness. And how does this transformation happen? The transformation happened because of the time energy, jiva, karma, and swabhava. All these four things, along with the three modes, produced Mahat Tattva. So in the Mahat Tattva, the three modes are active. However, the Sattvagun, the mode of goodness, is predominantly available or present. So now, from Mahat Tattva, which is in the mode of goodness, the next state comes, which is called as Ahankara. In this state, the first there is increase in mode of passion after goodness. From passion, there is increase in mode of ignorance. That state is called as Ahankar. And from that state of ahankar, in which there is predominance in the mode of ignorance, five gross elements like earth, water, air, fire, ether, they are created. And then the five tanmatras like sound, touch, taste, smell, form, all these things are created. And five action senses, five knowledge senses, and their controlling devatas are all created from uh, the the material nature, which is predominantly in the mode of ignorance, called as ahankar. Then after everything is created, these elements are all lying separately. They could not, even though they were all created, the devatas, the prototypes, everything is created, but they could not do the creation because they were unable to produce, because without the help of the Lord's cohesive energy, they were unable to come together. So the Lord senses cohesive energy, and the whole universe becomes ready for creation. However, it waits for 1,000 years on the waters of the causal ocean, and then Lord Garbhodakshaya Vishnu enters into that. Only when Garbhodakshaya Vishnu enters, actually the universe gets life. He is considered the super soul of the universe. So, verses 16 to 53, now we are going to discuss how Brahma's secondary creation happens. So, in the previous verse, we saw how primary creation happened, that the structure of the universe was created, and Garbhodakshaya Vishnu entered into the universe. So, now we are going to see how from Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, Lord Brahma is going to be born. So, in the verse 16, Brahma's birth is described how he is, I'm sorry, he, okay. So Brahma's birth is described how Garbhodakshaya Vishnu from his navel came a lotus flower, and on the top of the lotus, Brahmaji was created. And after Brahmaji takes birth, he performs tapasya and receives blessings of Lord Vishnu. So after receiving the blessings of Lord Vishnu, as directed by him, Brahmaji begins to create the universe as it was before, if it is a dissolution. And the first thing he creates, we already saw in the chapter 12 all these things. If you remember, in the chapter 12, we saw the five kinds of nashains or the ignorance that he creates. That's the first thing he creates. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes, why is he creating ignorance first? What's the reason for creating ignorance? So he writes in his commentary that how the living, and he's going to create different kinds of living entities like demons, demigods, human beings, bhutas, pishachas, gandharvas. There are different types of bodies, species he is going to create. But the living entities is ultimately jiva, soul, spirit soul. So for it, for the spirit soul, all these forms are unnatural, whether it be the form of a demigod or a demon or a gandharva or a human being or a pishacha or bhuta. All these bodies are all actually unnatural for the spirit soul because its eternal spiritual form is very different. So if the spirit soul has to accept a material form, then it needs to be conditioned. That is why ignorance is created first. So depending on the level of ignorance, different kinds of bodies can be tolerated by the living entity. So he creates five types of ignorance: tamishra, andatamishra, tamas, moha, and mahamoha. So in this way, these five types of ignorance he creates. And after creating the five types of ignorance, he feels very morose. So, so because the ignorance is created from his shadow, so he feels very morose. And from that ignorance comes the qualities of ignorance. That is the five types of, like say for example, when from the tamas comes anger, kind of, etc., the qualities. And from those qualities, the yakshas and rakshasas are produced. From that, when from his shadow Brahmaji produces these ignorance, from those ignorance, according to the quality of the ignorance, yakshas and rakshasas come. And seeing that Brahmaji is very disturbed, so he gives up the mentality of the ignorance. And the yakshas and rakshasas actually accept, take possession of that body or the mentality that Brahmaji has given up. And what he has given up is ignorance. So they accept ignorance. And that ignorance takes the form of night. And the yakshas and rakshasas actually accept that form of ignorance in the form of night. And hunger and thirst is also created uh, along with this ignorance. So yakshas and rakshasas, they become very active in the night. If you read Rama and Lord Ram and Lord Lakshman, when they are being asked by Vishwamitra from Dashrath Maharaj, so Vishwamitra says, I want your two sons to accompany me to fight the Rakshasas and the Yakshas. And Dashrath's counter that, no, sorry, my Ram cannot do it. And what is the reason he gives? He is Ramo Rajiva Lochana. He says Ramo Rajiva Lochana, and the Acharyas mention, what kind of a counter is this? My son Lord Ram has lotus like eyes, so he cannot fight with the Rakshasas and Yakshas. That doesn't seem very logical. Just because your son has lotus like eyes, so he can fight with Rakshasas and Yakshas. So the Acharyas explain the meaning behind Dashrath Maharaj saying, my son has lotus like eyes and he won't be able to fight with Rakshasas and Yakshas. The inner meaning is, The lotus actually blooms in the morning and closes when the sun sets. So similarly, Lord Ram is used to going to bed very early. As soon as the sun sets, he would go to sleep. So his eyes were like the lotus that would close when the sun sets. So how this lotus sets when the sun lotus closes when the sun sets. Similarly, Lord Ram's eyes also would close. That means he would go to sleep very early after the sun set. But the Yakshas and Rakshas are those people who are always active in night. So he would say, so that's why Dashrath Maharaj was saying, my son is never used to be awake late in the night. His eyes are like lotus, they just close as soon as the sun sets. So he is not actually fit for fighting the Yakshas and Rakshasas. He has no experience of being awake in the night. So here we can see the connection also. Yakshas and Rakshasas accept night, and that's the time they're very active. And after this, describing this pained by this hunger and thirst, they actually ran after Brahma because they have now accepted the qualities that came along, which is hunger and thirst. They actually run behind Brahma to actually eat him. And frightened, then he actually requests them to spare him, and then they're taken care of. So then, from his mode of goodness, ignorance, he created this. Then, now that his body, if you see, first of all, he was there and then he created five types of ignorance. So that was uh, his bodily condition at that time. So that's how Yakshas and Rakshasas came. So now that the ignorance is actually shed, he gave up this mentality of ignorance, which was accepted by the Yakshas and Rakshasas as in the form of night. Now his body is fully in the mode of goodness. So from that goodness come demigods, and shining with effulgence, then Brahmaji actually creates the demigods, devatas, and they are situated in mode of goodness because that's how uh, Brahmaji is situated, and they accept the effulgence when which Brahma gives up, because the goodness is actually uh, even in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says goodness has illumination, knowledge, light. So, and that is what is given by Brahmaji. He gives up the effulgence, and the demigods accept that, and the effulgence takes the form of day. So, the demigods are actually accepting the day. And then Brahmaji creates from passion, or from his rear side, he creates demons. And then after the demons are created, they start attacking him for sex. So Brahmaji actually goes and takes shelter of the Supreme Lord, and then Supreme Lord asks him to give up this passionate mentality, which was like overly attached for sexual appetite. So when he gives up that, then the demons accept that, and the particular passion takes the form of twilight, because there is day, there is night, and the in between time, the sandhya, the evening time, twilight time, is very passionate, and they are very much addicted, or they are very much influenced by lusty desires, and this is the general nature of the twilight also. And then from verse 32 to 37, actually there is a whole description of these demons accepting that form of twilight in the form of a uh, beautiful girl. They just assume this twilight taking up a beautiful woman. So Vishwachakra Thakur writes how that beautiful woman is actually an illusion that is seen by the demons. They're just assuming it as a form of a woman, and they glorify, and in this way they are bewildered. And after that, Brahmaji then creates Gandharvas and Apsaras by his beauty which he had relished. He, sorry, my spelling for the beauty on the screen is wrong, but it is beauty, and he relishes his own beauty with smiling and with smelling. So, and from there, Gandharvas and Apsaras come. And this particular beauty is when he gives up beauty, then it takes the form of moonlight, and that's what is accepted by Gandharvas and Apsaras. And creation, then he creates bhutas and pishachas. So Brahma actually then creates them, bhutas and pishachas, from his laziness. So, but when he closed his eyes and he saw them, they were actually being in a very disturbed state. Their hair scattered and they're not dressed, and so in this way they were very bewildering. So when he then he closed his eyes and then he gives up that mentality, which is laziness. The bhutas and pishachas actually accept the body thrown off by Brahma in the form of yawning, laziness. And this is also known to be as the sleep which causes drooling. And these bhutas and pishachas, they accept this form of laziness, and they also attack people who are in that mood of laziness, drooling while sleeping, or basically when they are impure. That's when all these bhutas and pishachas actually take control. And we see anytime a person is haunted, we call them generally insane. They become insane, they behave in a different way than usual. So these bhutas and pishachas actually create their attack, create unmada. Bhagavatam says Unmada means actually madness. I think I have a chat or something. Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Namaskar, Prabhu.
Hare
Can I
Krishna.
ask a question?
Yes, please.
So I was curious. I apologize. I don't. It's a little tangential, but um, because Brahma is creating all of these things, or just based on like time of day, I'm curious. Do you know if when one is born into the material world, the time of day that you're born has any association, I guess, with some mode that you're predominantly in, or type of personality? Does that have any correlation?
I'm to be very honest, I personally don't know much about that topic, which is related to astrology and everything. However, one thing we can see is the modes could be changed. The modes of a person can be like changed by his behavior. Like Krishna says in the chapter 17 of Bhagavad Gita, there is food, charity, austerity, and sacrifice that a person does. So by changing those, altering those things, a person can alter his modes also. So even for sure there will be some effect on the time that the person takes birth. That I'm not sure that, like, what actually takes more importance is, Prabhupada also writes in this particular chapter purports, the Garbhadan Samskar, the mentality of the husband and wife, the partners, that whatever is their mentality, that's actually is like passed on to the child. So Prabhupada writes in these, in the purpose of this chapter, about that. So Garbhadan Samskar, that actually has a lot of effect. Apart from that, the time that the baby takes birth, that I'm exactly not sure.
Thank you so much. And may I ask another question?
Yes.
So this is actually related to earlier, and I apologize if I'm honing on this one detail, but you had mentioned that in order for one to take a material body, one must be put into ignorance. But
Mhm.
I'm guessing that doesn't apply to the pure devotees who descend, because they also take a material body, but they are not in ignorance. And I know this may be controversial, but for example, Srila Prabhupada, uh, he had a material body, but my assumption is that he's not in ignorance. And then on the flip side, if you can comment, is if that were always true, then does that mean that one who, I guess, the pure devotee in this world is only a sadhana siddha who then perfects one's life, but still has a material body?
I followed your question until about Prabhupada. After that, I did not follow.
Sorry. So, for example, we can say Narada Muni had a spiritual body.
Mhm.
From my understanding, he never had an actual material body. However, Srila Prabhupada, for example, um, I know it's controversial whether he was a sadhana siddha or a nitya siddha, but he had a material body. So, my question is, when you said that in order to take a material body, one must be born
Okay,
in ignorance. Yeah.
I personally haven't heard anything about Prabhupada. Means we always consider, or it's kind of very apparently clear that Prabhupada is not a sadhana siddha. He is not. He is a eternally perfected being who has come to this world to preach.
So then you would say then that I apologize to Honan, that wouldn't apply to his pure devotees sent down then, correct? Because they can still take material bodies, but they are not in ignorance.
Yeah, means when you mean by ignorance, there is these three modes. There is some mode of ignorance, there is mode of goodness, there is mode of passion. Say for example, even if a person is living in that body, pure devotee, if he is going to sleep, he can use that mode to do certain activities in this world, but they are not affected by the modes. They're not influenced by the modes. They can use, because they have to use, say for example, while living in this world, they have to take these modes to act in this world, but that does not mean they will come under completely under the influence of those modes. I'm not sure if it
Thank you
makes
so
sense.
much. Yes, thank you. Hare Krishna.
Okay.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Can I also ask?
Yes. Yes, mother.
Okay, yeah, two questions. One is just to follow up on Athena's. When a pure devotee, whether we're talking about Srila Prabhupada or anybody else who is a pure devotee means they are performing activities exclusively for Krishna's pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
So can we say that I would think that such persons do not have material bodies.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, because when Athena was talking about their having material bodies, I was like, but if you're a pure devotee, you know, how could you be having material body?
Mm-hmm.
Even though their body looks like, a regular, like the bodies of regular conditioned souls, but isn't that just by appearance only, and that their body is actually spiritual, not material? What would you say?
I would say when we say Jivan Mukta, or when we say an advanced soul's body is spiritual, it is spiritual because it is there. The soul is fully in its glory, is manifesting in its full glory, is fully, like it is called Purna Vikasita Chetana. It's completely manifested consciousness. There are various stages of consciousness. There are 5 levels. There is there is Sankuchita, there is Mukulita, like that. So general human beings are in just budding consciousness, but they may even come like a little bit of a blossoming consciousness. But a fully blossomed consciousness is the consciousness of a Mahapurusha, means one who is Jivan Mukta. So the consciousness is fully manifested. The body is still material. If you see, they also grow old, they also get disease, they also become skinny, all these things happen. So that does not in any way reduce their spiritual glory. But that body, because it is in connection with a great spirit, in a soul which is manifesting a full consciousness, the body is considered actually spiritual in a sense. But for all practical matters, the body is matter. We
Okay,
consider
so
it spiritual as because it is respected, because that particular matter is in touch with one of the souls which is fully manifesting of consciousness. That is why, in my opinion, it is respected highly spiritually, and it is considered very spiritual. But for all practical considerations, it is material.
therefore it is comprised of the three modes.
It is.
The soul is not affected by those three modes, but their body is comprised of the three modes.
Yeah, the matter, which is the 5 elements and the subtle bar,
Yeah.
everything is there. However, it is not like any other person's body, any other conditions jiva's body.
But how is it different then? I mean, if
See,
it's, you
in
know,
terms of, if you see in terms of chemical composition, or how, in terms of matter, in terms of like physical analysis, it is matter. There is no doubt about it. But in terms of the mood, how we respect that body is not like any other person's body. We give samadhi, we actually worship, because it has housed a living entity whose consciousness is fully manifested. Because it was in touch with such a great soul, that material body also becomes spiritualized, in the sense it is considered very sacred.
yeah, sacred. Yes, I mean to say, of course, we revere
Yes,
that person's body, but it's still comprised of the modes, even
yes.
though we.
and and for all practical reasons, practical dealings, it is matter,
Yes.
but it is
Okay.
considered
That's,
very sacred. Am I making
yes.
sense? Okay.
Yes. Yes. And I just a separate question about the chart. I just need a
The
class.
chart which is there on the screen.
Yes.
Okay.
I just needed clarification
Hmm.
about the meanings of the headings. I'm sure you explained it, but I must have missed. Okay, so in the top heading, for
Okay.
example, you say gave up mentality of or created from. I'm not understanding that heading.
Okay. So first of all, from the ignorance, then yakshas and rakshasas are created. So Brahmaji is creating from ignorance yakshas and rakshasas who are created, and then after creating them, he gives up that mentality of ignorance.
He gives up that mentality of ignorance. You, Brahma creates from ignorance, and then he himself gives up the ignorance.
Gives that up, and then the yakshas rakshasas take that position, that whatever he is giving up, they take it as a possession, and that particular ignorance takes the form of night, which the yakshas and rakshasas take it as a possession.
Okay, so they take it as a possession. But, okay, wait. Connect to me this taking it as a accepting it as a possession, this ignorance and night. Okay, can you make that connection for me again?
You want me to repeat?
Yes, this the third
Brahmaji,
column there.
Brahmaji creates yakshas and rakshasas from ignorance,
Yeah.
and after creating them, so he feels very disgusted about the ignorance, so he gives up that mentality from which they were created. And that
Right.
particular thing that he gives up, that body, that it takes the form of a night. And the
Oh.
yakshas and rakshasas take possession of that night.
Okay. Okay. They taking possession of the night means that's when they perform their activities primarily. That's what
Yeah,
taking
something
possession
like that.
means.
It is not that they're owning it, in the sense they, it is the qualities match.
Uh-huh. And why would, when we come to goodness, why would he want to give up the mentality of goodness, Lord Brahma?
Okay, it's a good question. If he's giving up ignorance, why is he giving up
Goodness.
mode of, he's giving up ignorance, but why is he giving up mode of goodness?
Yeah.
Because, yeah, means, to be very honest, it's not given in very explicitly why he is giving up, but after creating everything, he is giving up that mentality.
Okay. Um, okay. So, and then when we come to the rear side,
Yes.
that's only referring to what the demons are created from.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to giving up the mentality,
Mm-hmm.
you know, what does rear side have to do
Passion,
with giving
passion.
up?
I did not put it there. It is passion. Prabhupada explains in the.
Oh, okay, okay. We didn't get to beauty yet, right?
Yeah, it is
Did we,
the next one is beauty.
did we discuss that yet?
Yeah, we discussed that. I think so.
Oh,
Yeah, we've discussed that.
okay.
Then he creates Apsaras and Gandharvas from by
Yeah.
his beauty,
Hmm.
which he has. He
Oh,
actually.
yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, because I know we discussed laziness. Yes.
Yes. So then now we are
Okay.
supposed to discuss the 42nd and 43rd.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Susan.
So now from the verses 42nd, he's going to create Pitrus and Sadhyas. These are the Pitrus accept the Shraddha offerings, and Sadhyas also accept certain offerings. So there is two things. One, he actually creates, thinking himself of very powerful. He actually creates the sadhyas from his invisibility, and sorry, from his power he creates sadhyas. From his invisible form he creates pitrus, and they both accept shraddha offerings. And after that, he creates antardhana. Antardhana means which is which is actually hiding. Antardhan means disappearing, because generally we call someone who's passing away as a dehantar or antardhan, we call like that. So here Brahmaji is disappearing, and in that disappearance he is in that form where when he disappears, or when he gives up that form of disappearance, that from that siddhas and vidyadharas come, and they are also actually generally invisible. So here Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur writes, all most of these personalities, they are there in the in the space, but we can sometimes see them. We can experience that somebody is there, but we cannot actually see them. So we also see this happens in the Chota Haridas, uh, when after he gives up his body, uh, he comes and sings, and they can only hear the voice, but they can't actually see him. So I'm just trying to connect what we know from the various episodes of Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita. So these siddhas and vidyadharas are actually invisible, and then Brahmaji creates from his reflection Kim Purushas and Kinnaras. They actually praise Brahma in the dawn, which is the early morning, and then they. This is why, and then he is actually, there is a whole explanation of how the snakes, serpents, and nagas are created. Then from his anger he actually creates the snakes and serpents, and he also lies down, and that is why most of these created beings like the snakes, they are all like reptiles. He lies down also. So not satisfied with the creation of the progress of space of the progress of the creation, he lays down in a sullen mood, and then he gives up that body. So from that body, there is some anger also of not being able to accomplish what he wants. From that anger, from the anger and the body in which he lies down, come snakes, serpents, and many hooded nagas, and they have this anger because snakes are considered to be angry causelessly. So that cruelty is there in these animals. And then from his own mind, he creates Manu, who establishes sacrificial actions, and he gives different parts of his own body to the great sages, and they are all created. So that happens from the word in the word explained in the verses 52 to 53. In the verse one of these purports, Vishnu Chakravarti writes how in the chapters 3.10, 3.12, and 3.20, all these three chapters explain secondary creation of Brahma. 3.10, 3.12, and 3.20, the current chapter. Some of the, if you see, compare all these three chapters, keep them together and see how is the narration flowing. So in each chapter the flow of the events is slightly different. In some there are some details are given, in another chapter those details are omitted, or they are put in a different order. So then Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur writes, what is the actual sequence of creation by Brahma? He says first, the animals with five joints are created, then trees and plants are created, then snakes, then cows and buffaloes, then yakshas, rakshasas, kinnaras, kimpurushas, and after all of them are created, then kumaras, the sages, are created, and after the sages are created, the human beings are created, and then Manu is created at the end. That's what Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur writes. So from this Manu, then from the next chapter we are going to see how. Uh, okay, it's 53. From in the next chapter we are going to see the descendants of Manu. And here also, Vishnu Chakravarti writes, it is explained in this verse 49, Brahma, thinking himself very successful, creates from his mind the Manus. Manus means plural. However, Vishnu Chakravarti writes, even though it is mentioned in the plural, first only Swayambhu, Manu, and Shatarupa will be created. Over a period of time, the other Manus will be created because there are 14 Manus in a day of Brahma, and like that each day has 14 manus, so that's a lot. In his whole life there's going to be so many manus, and they all won't be created at one shot. First Swayambhu Manu is created, and when time comes, the other manus will be gradually created. So then Brahma gave Manu his own human form. So on seeing the manus, then the from Manu, all the religious principles will come. So that's why the next chapter 21, the discussion will begin like, okay, now that the Manu is created, what is the dynasty? How did he expand his dynasty? Please explain explain the dynasty of Swayambhu Manu. That's what Vidura will inquire from Maitreya. Please explain about the glorious dynasty of Swayambhu Manu. And in that connection, Maitreya will explain how Swayambhu Manu had two sons, Uttanapad and Priyavrata, and had three daughters, Akuti, Prasuti, and Devahuti. And he will give a small introduction to all of them. In that, when he mentions about Devahuti marrying Kardam Muni and giving birth to Kapil Dev, then Vidura will ask, can you please explain more about this pastime of Kardam Muni marrying Devahuti and giving birth to Kapil Dev, and Kapil Dev explaining Sankhya Yoga to Devahuti. So can you please explain about this pastime? So that will start in the next chapter, and it will go till the end of third canto, that meeting of Kardama Muni and Devahuti, and then birth of Kapil Dev, and then Kapil Dev's teachings to Devahuti. So all this will go from chapters 21 to 33. So we are completed so far in this section of Bhagavatam, creation and secondary creation. And in relation to these pastimes, these creation and subcreation, secondary creation, we saw Varahadev and Hiranyaksha's pastimes. Now we will be entering the different descendants of Swayambhu Manu. In this canto, we will see Kardam Muni, Kapila Dev, and Devahuti, basically Devahuti's life. In the next canto, we will see uh, Akuti and Ruch and also Prasuti, and in that connection then Uttanapada also will come, whose son is Dhruv Maharaj, and then Priyavrat Maharaj will come in Canto 5. So in this way the conversation between Vidura and Maitreya is going to continue for a while now, from the Canto 3 until Canto 5 literally. So thank you for the participation. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Vanchakalpataro Vaishya Kripa Sindhubhyo Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. If there are any questions,